hello, and welcome to another episode of Activating Greatness, the show where we dig into what it really takes to lead with purpose, inspire performance, and create lasting impact. As always, I'm your host, Alec McChesney, and every episode we sit down with leaders, thinkers, and change makers who are unlocking potential in themselves, their teams, and their organizations. Here, we talk about the real stuff: leadership that drives culture, strategy that creates momentum, and the mindset that turns good intentions into game-changing results. Because greatness, it isn't a title, it's a choice. It's something that you activate every single day. So thank you. Thank you for listening, for showing up, and for being part of a community of leaders who refuse to settle for good enough. Now, let's dive in and meet today's incredible guest. Today's guest is Jon Stenberg, the CEO and president of Citizens Inc., a global life insurance company operating across multiple markets. Jon has spent decades leading in complex and competitive environments, guiding organizations through change, growth, and strategic reinvention. He believes leadership requires disciplined prioritization, honest conversations, and the courage to make hard trade-offs. He's known for challenging complacency, pushing his leadership team to stay sharp, and insisting that leaders think critically about where excellence matters and, frankly, where good enough is the right call. Today's conversation centers on one of his core beliefs: great leaders need to stay appropriately annoyed because comfort is the enemy of progress. And Jon, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today, and I'm really fired up about today's conversation. Before we get in, want to give you the opportunity to maybe further introduce yourself to those who aren't familiar with Jon Stenberg.
Thanks, Alec. We're going to have some fun today. So, first of all, they say the camera adds 10 pounds. I think on this camera, it's adding 10 years. I don't feel like I look. All right. So a couple things. I'm a farm boy from Michigan. I'm the first person in my family line ever to go into the corporate world. So I'm figuring out as I go. And I learn every day about things I could do better and things that we all could do better. I'm also a military veteran. That's very important to me. And I have a lot of courage and respect for those who serve in that capacity. Other than that, let's go. So you mentioned appropriately annoyed, and I will right off the bat, I think that's an annoying phrase. Like it's awkward, but it says exactly what it means. What do I mean by that? Well, if you are totally happy with everything and you're not annoyed by anything, well, you are by definition living in complacency. And I think complacency has taken down the biggest companies at times in the world. Royal Typewriter, Kodak. You can name companies that became complacent. They were incurious. They were not annoyed. And so what do I mean by annoyed? Well, I want to celebrate our wins, right? So we should go out our day in a happy way. We want an aura of engagement for our teams, our employees. They don't want a sullen leader. Absolutely not. We all have our bad days, but we by and large need to be chipper. But leaders also have to have a list of things that are annoying them, like things that we could do better. We could our customer service could be better. We could answer the phone faster. Our website could be more easy to navigate. It should be easier to pay us. Like you name it. Our bread should taste better or be more healthy. There should be things that are rattling in your brain at all times of things that you need to fix and you need to fix. And you also should be a little bit annoyed that you don't know, what the next thing is that you should be annoyed about. You should be like, okay, what am I missing? Because who else is going to think about that? I'll tell you who else is going to think about that and who else is going to find that annoyance. Your competition. Your competition is going to find how to do that better. And then where are you? You're playing catch up. So I encourage everyone just to not be sullen, not to be annoyed visibly all the time, but be annoyed by the things that could be better. Be annoyed by what you don't know could be better and search for those things.
I am so glad that we just ripped off the Band-Aid and jump in, John, because since our prep call, I have been thinking about this nonstop. And I have recoined the term just miffed, right? Like, I want you to have a little bit like, hey, I'm just rubbed the wrong way right now about this or about that. And, I find it really interesting, the perspective of complacency. And we're going to talk about good enough here in a couple of minutes as well. But within this appropriately annoyed, I think about all of the great books of Good to Great or Dan Heath's Upstream, or I just finished listening to Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0. And the reason I bring that up is you brought up your background, which is military, Michigan farm boy who was learning on the fly at all times. And in all of those books, there is a core theme about being appropriately annoyed, and yet no one will ever describe it in the way that you just walked through. All of the stories of Blockbuster getting beat out by Netflix and so on down the line, it is an era of complacency and not trying to find better ways to do things. And so I do want to challenge you right out of the gate with a bad podcast question. We say, I want my leadership team to be appropriately annoyed. But what does that look like in practice from a, hey, I want you to be appropriately annoyed. I want you to find solutions and I want you to take us into a new direction. I want you to go and get some of that customer and client feedback and find where that maybe annoyances, that rub is in the market for our competitors, for ourselves, for our customers. And then let's actually make an impact, because I think about innovation and then companies don't actually let their team members be innovative or make change. So how do you balance this? I want you to be appropriately annoyed and I still got to get the thing done.
So there's two words in that phrase.
Yes.
And everyone, when they think about it, they only hear one. They hear annoyance. The other word gets 50% of the attention if you use it right, appropriately. So you asked, what does that look like? Let me tell you what it looks like. It's an excitement around doing, look what we could do. We can do magic. Hey, this application for credit is 18 questions long, but that's half of that's holdover from 20 years ago. We could get rid of it. They're not risk reducing. Gosh, we could have the shortest credit application and still have all the protective value. I'm pulling something out of the air. That's not my world. But how exciting is that? How cool is that? So what you do, the person is not the problem. The gap between where you're at and what could be and how cool that would be, that's the joint problem. So we are on the same side and we should be jointly excited about closing that gap. And there's the annoyance that we can't close that gap fast enough. So again, I said, it's not a sullenness. It's not I'm curmudgery. I'm walking around the hallways. Oh, gee, what mood is John in today? Not at all. Not at all. It's mental high fives. Hey guys, but that should draw people into that appropriate annoyance. And your annoyance should be aimed at what could be better. And gosh, how soon could we close that gap? And I wish we could do it faster. So it creates a positive, it doesn't sound like a positive phrase, but it creates a positive energy because you see the vision of what could be. Oh my gosh, that would be a huge competitive edge. Oh my gosh, we could make our yogurt healthier and more cost effective. Whatever it is, you should get excited about it. And the annoyance is at first, gosh, we have a gap here, but then the annoyance turns into, I'm annoyed we can't close this gap faster. And there's a positivity in there, Alec. Draw upon that energy.
I love the pairing of appropriately annoyed with another phrase that I love, which is yes and that means we're trying to find that solution as part of that. And I think, it comes back to, do you know how we're really good at X topic? Yes. But could we be better? And I had a guest on last week and his word of the year, which was really surprising for me coming from him, was imagine. And he was like, imagine if we could do this just a little bit better. Imagine if we took this
I
process
love that.
and made it
That's
a
great.
little bit better. And it blew my mind. I was like, that, even just having that framework goes
Yeah.
from this interesting aspirational to like, hey, just let's look at this process and imagine if it could just be a little bit different, a little bit better, a little bit more effective.
I
I think
love how
that's
that draws your mind into what could be about closing this gap that you're annoyed about and how it could be
yes.
better. I love that. That's
Yeah.
great. It's better than my stuff.
Pairing. Well,
I want to listen to his
I like
podcast.
pairing. It comes out Jason Nichols. I'll send it to you. It comes out the Thursday after yours. So we've got them lined up back to back. So and it's one of the reasons why, as you're listening to this, we love the Activating Greatness podcast, because we're coming out with nuggets like that now 2 times a week, Jon. Every Monday, every Thursday, you're going to get new episodes of the show, which is just a nice little plug here. I want to take this conversation and move it to this concept of good enough. And you really opened my eyes in our prep conversation, because at Velocity, we've been pushing this. Is this my best work? Is this good enough? And it's a theme around the Activating Greatness podcast of good enough is neither. We don't want to settle. And then you and I have this conversation, and we talked about, you got to know when good enough actually does work in some areas. And it kind of snowballed into knowing your weaknesses, knowing your strengths. And I kind of raised my hand and I said, I'm probably the worst individual at PowerPoint there is at our organization. And I know that, and knowing it and communicating it to my team allows us to work better as a team. So I just want to give you the floor, give you the microphone here to talk about your thought process around good enough, and why sometimes good enough actually is okay. And we're going to go over here and we're going to be excellent in this area, but we just need to be good enough to get by in this area.
I'll make a very bold statement, Alex, and then I'll stand behind it and I'll defend it.
All right.
If you can't be okay with some good enough, you can't be a good leader. Full stop.
Tell me
period.
More. Tell me more. Oh, I love this. Tell me more.
So there's nobody that's listening to this podcast has not heard of the phrase, the power of no. When you say no to something, what are you saying? I'm not going to spend resources on that. I'm not going to take on that project. I'm not going to add that thing, because whatever it's designed to address is good enough. Because you got bigger fish to fry. Let me give you a stark example so we can start with something that's non-controversial. Okay?
Yeah.
The color in Withering Springs conference room down the hallway. I'm not crazy about it. Well, why aren't I spending all my weekends and times figuring out what the best color is? Is fuchsia better than this or that? You know what? It's good enough. It's good enough. By the time we start stressing about that and fixing that, means we've fixed everything else. Because our payment system could be easier for the client. It could be more accepting. We could accept PayPal and all this other stuff. Maybe that's more important than the color of Withering Springs conference room. It's ridiculous, right? Because the two don't belong in the same conversation. But I just offer that up as an example that it's non-controversial to say that's good enough, because we got other problems we got to solve. All right. Nobody's going to leave because the color was the wrong shade of fuchsia. That's not the luxury world we get to live in, right? We're having to make really tough decisions, and if we weren't having to, then you know what? We're in the wrong place in our role, because they're paying us a lot of money to be in the roles we're in. Or if you're a business owner, you have high stakes games to play, and the stuff you say no to is tough. Objectively, it would be good if you invested in that or fixed that or made that better. But we never have enough resources to do all three things. One ball's got to drop because these two are critical, and that's a little less critical. And we don't always have the luxury of doing all three. We rarely do. I'm jealous of those leaders that have, all the money and resources to do all the critical things. So that's what I mean about you have to be okay with good enough at times. Good enough is your friend. It
Yeah.
is really it's a practical application of the power of no.
Yeah. And another way that I started to look at it after our conversation comes back to, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, right?
Bingo.
And
Yep. No, but
and in this
that's never a controversial. But
yep,
what does that mean? It literally means some things are gonna have to be good enough for now.
Yeah, it's super interesting because I think every leader that's listening to this, myself included, has been in a room where someone brought something to our attention. And the moment they brought it to your attention, you can just think to yourself, this is not relevant for us right now. This is not going to help us reach the next stage. It's not one of our core focuses for the year. And all you're thinking is, why are we talking about this? Why are we putting an emphasis on this? And I think, to your point about what makes a great leader, this also goes back to that appropriately annoyed language. And the imagine is, we have to do that in the right areas, right? If somebody's appropriately annoyed, but it's just about the color of the Wuthering Heights office space, then you're not appropriately annoyed. You're just annoyed and you're off on your own. Go do your own thing. And so I think it comes back to those strategic initiatives, the ability to prioritize and deprioritize. And to your point, to frankly make some tough decisions in this process, because you're going to have team members that come to you with, good solutions and potentially things that can be better. But from a budget and resources standpoint, we just don't have the capacity to add to that at this current time. And it goes kind of that rainy day list, for a year or 2 years down the road when we get everything else figured out more effectively. Right.
Yeah. I would just add, we all have
Please.
cringy memories in our career, right?
For better or for worse.
Yes, for both actually. I think
Yep.
about it, and right now I'm thinking about this moment, and internally I am cringing because
Oh man, I need to know.
one of my team members brought something to me. It was an idea, and it was one of the dumbest things I've heard. And I let him know. Oh my gosh. And I wish I could go back and repeat that time and hear him out, because what I what I ended up doing, I think, is cutting off all ideation from him.
Yeah.
He We should all have the freedom to brainstorm, and I I don't want to shut that curiosity down, and that's part of being appropriately annoyed. You think about this thing, and maybe you're just venting, da 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 da. So I wish I could go back and hear him out. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, like, why are we talking about this right now? Like, we had
Yeah.
major fish to fry, major problems we were trying to solve. And here's this idea that would just distract us. But I should have encouraged the ideation, and that he noticed something, and not just shut him down like that. So I would just be, yes, I agree with you. Uh, you want to encourage the good while still saying maybe no to the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, right there is a perfect example of the structure and the environment, right? We want an environment where people can find those ideas, can find those things that they're appropriately annoyed with, can be curious. And then as leaders, need to explain why that's not the right time because of X, Y, and Z, because of the priorities that we currently have in place. And I think it's a great segue to a line of questioning I never thought that I would have on a leadership podcast here, but it's another one of your terms that I just fell in love with in our prep call, which was grown up version of would you rather. And again, I want to take us out of the podcast here for a second and just lament how your background, Michigan farm boy, first one to go to the corporate world. And one of the things that you said on our prep call was, you're just learning by doing this. You're learning by doing and trying and doing and trying. And then we come up with appropriately annoyed and the grown-up version of would you rather. And I'm starting to see the playing field in a much different light. So thank you for that. You described leadership as a grown-up version of would you rather. And if you make one decision, something else is going to be deprioritized. You make a decision and you have to, lay off some team members. You make a decision and this team has to be relocated. There's a lot of real world things that are happening. How does this framework shape the way you make difficult decisions? And any extra context you want to add to the grown-up version of would you rather, I am all ears on. And I certainly think our audience will be as well.
Well, it's so the game, the way kids play would you rather, it's two horrible options that you would never pick, but you're forced to make a pick. It's like the movie Saw, I guess. Like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
do I die or cut my leg? I was like, this is just not a game I want to play, but I play it every single day at work. Because we don't get the luxury of the color of the conference room versus fixing our billing system. We get fix our billing system or reprice our product because it's mispriced. Oh my gosh, they're both critical, but you only have enough resources to do one. Reformulate our recipe versus refurbish the factory to make it more efficient. Well, you should do both. Well, you can't do both, boss. We got to do one or the other.
Yeah.
And so these decisions are why we're in the role we're in, why we're leaders. Yeah. Because if they're easy decisions, they don't need a leader to do that. They're done by people that don't need to be leaderful because it's just obvious to do, which, by the way, sometimes obvious isn't done. But apply that in your in our context, and you have to make a decision. So you can't do two things. You can't do analysis paralysis, and you can't just shoot off the cuff.
Yep.
So you have to have a fine balance between doing enough research to have one of the choices get a lead that you can defend to yourself first and foremost, but then if you can defend it to yourself, you can explain the decision to others, to your board, to your coworkers, and it may not be the right decision, but you made a decision with the information available at the time. Now, I was in the Army, but the Marine Corps, I have a lot of respect for them. Even though the Army and Marine Corps don't get along, one of the things I really like about the Marine Corps is, I argue it's because they're not smart enough, but I really love that they say, when you don't know, you decide. The only wrong decision is no decision. Yeah. They have an absolute immediate action protocol. You decide and you act. You decide and you act. Yeah. And so speed of action above all else, which means they make a lot of mistakes, but they're fast, right? And speed on the battlefield is actually a force multiplier. Yeah. We can't be that quick. We have to take a little bit of time and understanding how much research to do before you enter analysis paralysis is another hard skill set. So we as leaders need to develop that. And the standard I use is, can I defend this decision to myself? Can I go on the other side? I have a coach. My coach gave me something super powerful. So I had this idea I wanted to do. And he said, he gave me a weekend exercise. And I did it. It's like, holy crap. It was a lot of fun for me, but not everyone's weird and wired like me. He says, I want you to make a list of all the reasons why that is a stupid effing idea. His words, not mine. But it really, I'm military, so he has a certain latitude of language with me. And I got the mission. Oh, yeah, I can do that. And I tore myself down. I tore my idea down. I had a ball doing it. You have to do that. And if you can do that, and then you come up with all the reasons it's a dumb idea and your idea still weighs, well, I think you can defend it to yourself. And when somebody comes up with an objection, guess what? You thought about it in that exercise. So
Mhm.
I owe David, my coach, uh, a real feather in his cap for bringing that little tool to me. So I'll share that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big piece of this would you rather in decision making is there's so much text out there, there's so much coaching about decision making, but also it's a learned process for you as an individual, and the way that you might make a decision might be a little bit different than I do versus someone Army, Marines, so on down the line. But you have to know, within your style, right? We talk at Velocity all the time about the bird styles and eagle and owl and all of the above. You have to know what it takes for you to make a decision. Now, I am definitely more on the lines of, if I can argue it with myself, I'm running and I'm going to make that decision. And I'm comfortable making a mistake and coming back and saying, well, I made a mistake, but I did X, Y, and Z. And here's why we went with that decision. And I think a lot of the up and coming leaders that we work with at Velocity, what we hear is they're just not sure when to make that decision. Do I need to have 90% of the information? Do I need to have 70%? Do I need to get John's approval and Alec's approval and Abby's approval, or at least get their feedback? And then the moment you start asking all of those questions, that's when we get into that, analysis paralysis, that ladder of inference, and a little bit of the shame
Yeah.
spiral. And then suddenly we're not capable of making that decision, or worse, in a lot of ways, we make a decision that we don't feel confident in. And when we do get pressed on it, we kind of fold a little bit. And I certainly, it's been thankfully a couple of years, but I can recall coming in and, trying to put my position in a really exciting place, making a call. And then the moment I started getting questions on it, I was like, wow, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that. And now you kind of start
Yep.
to have that internal doubt of, wow, did I make this wrong choice? And, I think everybody needs to get more and more comfortable from a self-awareness perspective on how do you play the game of would you rather? How much information do you need in order to your point, be able to defend it to yourself, and also tear down your own idea? I absolutely love that line of thinking, and that as an exercise too.
Yeah. And when you can't just argue with yourself because we work in teams. You have to expose your thinking to others, and you
Yeah.
you have to. Now here's the risk there. Uh, I do my why is this a dumb idea exercise. I still like the idea. I go and I take it to somebody. What do you think? What could go wrong with this? Why is this dumb? Do you see the advantages? And let's say they hate the idea.
Yeah.
Well, now you're going to hurt their feelings if you go forward with it.
You still do it. Yeah.
And so now that's a complication. Now I have a relationship now I have to consider with this team member, and so you have to expose it to others, and you have to bring them along in a way that if you don't choose that way, at least now that they felt heard.
Yep.
Yep. And fine, the jury wasn't unanimous, but the jury member who got outvoted, they felt heard.
Yeah.
And that's just something we as leaders have to be comfortable with. Bring them along. You can't make everyone happy, otherwise you'd never make a decision.
Yeah. And I also, as you're bringing in others, showing them the full picture, because a lot of times what I have seen and what we've talked about on this podcast a lot is they agree that the vision needs to be changed. There's a problem. They can agree there's a problem. They might not agree exactly on how we solve the problem, but if they feel heard and they understand that that problem needs to be fixed, then a lot of times that creates that alignment for honest conversations. And I think it's a great segue into our final line of questioning here, John, which is teams that challenge each other. And one of the things that you told me right out of the gate was that you were going to be really transparent. You could pick up the phone, you could yell at me. The moment I brought up good enough is neither, you were like, well, I'm calling that one out because I think good enough is great in these areas. And we had just met and we were all of a sudden going back
Yeah.
and forth in a way that was like, we've been working together for 3 decades, which of course is a testament to you as an individual and as a leader. But how do we create that? How do we create that culture where someone can think critically? They can challenge your assumption and avoid this level of complacency, and then still shake hands after the meeting and say, "Hey, do you want to grab a beer? Do you want to watch a game? Is your kid going to recital?" Like, how do we actually build that infrastructure in a realistic way?
Well, first of all, I'm an odd duck. Uh, the example I'll give is I had at a former employer, the head of compliance, and I was the head of the division, and you could walk by us and hear us argue. That's the dumbest, and people were at first probably like, "Oh my gosh, what the hell's going on?"
Yeah.
So we'd have this fierce debate, and at the end of it, it's like, "Hey, am I going to see you down at the gym at 5:30? All right, man. Yeah. Are the kids coming over your neighborhood for Halloween this year, or my?"
Oh, I
And
love it.
it, part of that is when you're in the army, if I give you crap, it's a sign that I like you, right? Okay,
Yeah.
not everyone's wired like that. So some people are much more sensitive. Most are actually. So here's where I give I'll give the piece of advice that applies in your relationships, whether it's brother, sister, husband, girlfriend, you name it, and your coworkers, is be very careful when you argue with loved ones or coworkers, because nobody wins when you
Mm,
argue. What you don't want to listen to retort to win the battle, right? We're emotional. We get caught up in this. We want to be right, of course. You have to fight that urge. You have to fight that urge, especially in a husband-wife relationship. Like if you win that argument, beat them into the ground. Wow, you just
yeah.
lost.
Yes.
You
Yep.
just lost because the marriage is more important than whatever the heck you were arguing about. Well, don't listen to rebut. Have the conversation to truth seek.
Mm,
And the language you use in truth seeking is different than the language you use in a courtroom.
mhm.
It's, you mentioned something earlier. Yeah, and, okay, and, instead of yeah, but, because all
Mm,
people are going to hear the but.
yeah.
And so use all the language you would use in a truth seeking curiosity. And we're in this together. The gap, the problem that is the enemy, it's our joint enemy, not you. The
Yeah.
people is not the enemy. The problem is our joint enemy. And every time you have a joint enemy, you're on the same side now. You're allied, and
Yeah.
you're building the relationship, and you're seeking truth together. That's how normal people should operate, and because not everyone's weird like me and can have a really fun back and forth debate and say, "Hey, we're gonna hit the gym."
Yeah. We've got our four birds as part of the disc style. It's eagle, parrot, owl, and dove. And I think we need to add a fifth just for an odd duck. And we throw them somewhere in the matrix.
Yeah, I'll quack.
I am curious. I had a leader on. Her episode will come out in a couple of weeks, but one of the things that she said is she kind of raises her hand and introduces herself to new people when they join the team, or if they're transferring departments or whatever it might be. And she'll say, "Guys, I am who I am. I'm going to challenge everything." And it's not personal. It is because this is what I love. I'm so excited about it. It's out of passion. It's out of energy. It's never going to come off as it's personal, and you can remove names from it. But I love this. And she said, ever
Mhm.
since she started doing that, it has led to an environment where someone is willing to challenge her more because she admitted that. And I'm curious, is that something that I know you call it an odd duck and it's a little bit different how normal should do it, but is that something that you're openly inviting in leadership meetings, even throughout the organization from a top down, and then bottom up standpoint? Are you saying, "Hey, let's challenge mediocrity. Let's challenge the status quo"? Is that a message that you believe
Uh,
in and send out?
well, a huge challenge in my role is positional authority. It,
Yeah.
it is a roadblock to truth seeking because
Mm,
people are, I don't get the info, need the
yeah.
info. And
Yep.
people are, um, once they work with me and understand, it gets better. But some
Yeah.
people are just more reserved than others. and they filter too much.
Yeah.
And so then issues go along that I don't know about because they're, or ideas go unraised. And so that's a challenge. So I actually need to do more of that. So if I was to coach myself in this coaching session,
I
in
love
this
it. I
podcast,
love it.
I would say I need to say, and because I say it, but I don't think I say it enough, please find the fault in my ideas. Please, I'm begging you. I
Yes,
need you
please.
to tear these down because that will be as part of a truth seeking. But if I have an idea, I have to be very careful how I posit it because people are going to want to take it and run with it and support it.
Yeah.
So you have to tear down your own positional authority at times in order to truth seek and get to the best solution. Because some of those introverted people have some really deep thinking on stuff. And I want to tap into that.
I'm pausing so I can pull that out, and it's a snippet that I can use on LinkedIn. And I didn't call that a bad podcast question, but I think it's going to qualify as a bad podcast question. But just hearing you work through that answer is something that I think every leader can just continue to evolve, right? Like that's not one that you set it and forget it. It's just a continuing improvement on opening that door and having those conversations. And yes, you might have said that when you started or 6 months ago or at an all hands, but reiterating it. And I love the way that you said it. You kind of look to the ceiling, please find the flaws in my idea. I joke all the time. I can bring a good idea, but it's your jobs. Please make it a great idea. Like this was me on a Thursday night because I have issues and I was walking the dogs and I suddenly had a thought. Please take it and make it way better and take all of the credit, run with it. So I really appreciate you taking me down that thought process there, Jon. Final question for you, Jon, before we go into the 4 rapid fire questions. I'm just curious. You talk about complacency. We talk about the annoyingly, appropriately annoyed. What are some of the things that you do that other leaders can do just in general to stay sharp, to continue growing, making sure that we aren't as leaders stagnant inside the organization, but also as individuals, team leaders, whatever it might be? How do we make sure that we don't become irrelevant or complacent as well?
Well, I'm a lifelong learner. And it took me a while to build up to that. I like to, like the other day, I was on an airplane next to a guy. He was a lobsterman.
Okay.
I grilled him the entire flight, but he was probably exhausted when he got off the plane. And it was like, so I have this knowledge network theory that if I learned what's the best way to dig a ditch to run a phone line, it helps me understand quantum theory, and understanding quantum theory helps me make a decision on pricing because it's all connected. And so be hyper curious, be a lifelong learner. It really helps me stay sharp because in those other areas trigger lines of thinking in your own world that might not have been triggered had you just stayed in your own little bubble. And building this knowledge outside of your world gives you context in order to make these decisions better. And you start noticing parallels in military history, political situations, business situations, technology evolving, science. There's nothing off the table that I learned about stuff I don't want to learn about. Like the other day, I was like, okay, I watched a short video about crocheting. I don't ever want to crochet, but I know nothing about this, so I clicked on it.
Oh, I
And
love that.
I had zero interest, but I actually found interest. Like, oh, okay, that's cool. And I was like, huh, it's harder than I thought, or more interesting. So that curiosity helps stop complacency, and it triggers your thinking.
Yeah.
And we as leaders need to be little hamster wheels going in there on our own business, and understanding things outside of our business helps us do that. So I'd encourage everyone to be lifelong learners and watch stuff you're normally not interested in, little documentaries and stuff.
There's so much good there, and curiosity is a massive theme for Dave Feckman and the team here at Velocity in 2026. And I always go back. One of my favorite quotes, I think it was Steve Jobs at one of his commencement speeches, said, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," and just kind of walked through what those two elements mean, and staying hungry, not being complacent. He walks through that, and then stay foolish of do things that you're not good at, do things that you have never done before, and just admit that you're not the smartest person in the room, and essentially to stay as that lifelong learner. And I absolutely, I've always held that one to heart, especially the foolish aspect of that, because there's just something that rings really true. And I love the idea of you maybe on an airplane watching a video of a crocheting video. It does bring me a lot of joy, Jon. All right, we're going to go into 4 rapid fire questions. This was, we're at the 38-minute mark. This has been exactly what I thought it would be. Such a great conversation. I could already see people commenting, asking questions, and pushing for episode 2 of you and I later in the year. So we'll have to stay tuned for that one. Before we get there, though, 4 rapid fire questions off the top of your head. We're just going to run through them. Question number 1. What is one leadership habit that you rely on every day, no matter what?
Futuring, or what could be true. Imagine, actually.
Imagine.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Question number 2. What is the most underrated skill that a leader needs in order to be successful today?
Team building. Finding complementary skills and getting them to work together is a real high priority.
You're the general.
You can have the best strategy and vision and everything else I said, but if you don't have complementary skills, and those people don't necessarily naturally get along because people flock together, is you have to build the right team that gets along, that are going to execute against these great strategies we're coming up with.
Yeah, you are the general manager of the team, and you got to have the scheme and the process and the structure, but without the players to fit that scheme, it just does not. It does not work. I love that one. On the opposite side of the spectrum, question number 3: what is one thing that you believe great leaders should stop doing?
Anything that touches anywhere near condescension. Like, don't be condescending to people. I'm glad this podcast is activating greatness, not becoming great, because anytime we think we're great, wow, we lost the game. We lost the script, and it's not a good look. It's not inspiring. And then you tend to be condescending, and you kill off a lot of the great stuff we've just talked about on this podcast.
Yeah.
So check yourself, and don't be condescending.
Yeah, I love that. And, I hadn't used a single sports analogy until the rapid fire section, but you talk about the Super Bowl hangover, the World Series hangover that every team has had, except for, a couple of teams over the course of the last 70, 80 years. And so much of that is we got to this pinnacle, and then we got complacent, and then we rested, and everybody else is continuing to push. And I love that. That's the first time that answer has come up for question number 3 on what you believe great leaders should stop doing. So I appreciate you taking it in that direction. The last one here, question number 4: what's the best leadership advice that you've ever received?
I'm gonna change that question a little bit,
please,
and I'm gonna share with you an epiphany, which is obvious. Now, once I say it, it'll be a duh, but I hadn't thought about it. So I realized that you never figure it out. Let's go back to when you were 14. You're emotional, you're a teenager, but boy, when I get to become 18, it's going to be great. I'll have it all figured out. I'll be an adult. Well, at 18, now you're even more confused.
Yeah.
But boy, when you get to be 21, that's going to be great. You're 21, now you got debt piling up. You're confused. You're not making any money. You're more stressed out than you were before. But when you get to be in your late 20s, everything's going to be great. Well, now it's even worse. And every stage through life, you think you're going to have it figured out at the next point. And if there's evidence that that's not true, go visit an elder care facility. and you're going to see a room full of people that still don't have it figured out. As a matter of fact, they're lost. And so some people could view that as depressing. I think it's cool, because how boring would this life on this earth that we get to spend be if we had it all figured out? That's a boring life.
Whew.
Having this constant grind of trying to figure myself out, trying to figure you out, trying to figure us out, trying to figure this world out is really what makes this fun. So give yourself a little break and realize it's okay if you don't have it figured out. It's okay if you're struggling a little bit. It's okay if you're a little stressed, because the opposite is, I think, kind of death. It's just like, okay, you're just in this nothingness. So find joy in this journey, and the joy in that you don't have it all figured out, and it's a little chaotic.
I could have thought you were going to go in any direction, Jon, and it's not often that I am speechless at any point. For those who know me, that's a hell of an answer. That is, and I appreciate you taking us on that journey and moving on from the leadership advice and more of an epiphany. And, you brought up the 14 to 18 to 21, so on down the line. But one of the things that we see all the time is, when I get the next job, when I get that promotion, when I get this thing, and you get there and it's like, well, now there's a bunch of stuff here that doesn't work well. And there's a bunch of problems and I'm more stressed. And, it's that rung on the ladder, and instead of the whole ladder being the journey. And, I always say that the best advice I've ever received, and it's never even really been actual advice, is just work and trust the process. Like, trust the process, enjoy the process, play the game, be a good human, be curious, all of the things. But at the end of the day, just, it's a process, and the process isn't finished until you're finished. And so as long as you're still here, process is still going. So keep playing, keep trying. So ooh, you gave me the goosebumps on a Monday afternoon. I'm gonna look at my daughter is 11 months old today as we're recording, and it's just it's such a different perspective when you take what we do on a day-to-day basis and you put it in the light that you just did. And that's why it's called the Activating Greatness Podcast, Jon. You absolutely crushed that answer. Before I let you go, though, I've got to know who else are we interviewing? Who is another leader that we should interview next? Someone that is doing meaningful work that others can learn from. I'm curious where you're thinking with this one.
That's a really hard decision. And that's the hardest question you've asked me, by the way.
I love that. I love that.
The answer I'm going to give is a little near and dear to my heart, and it's a little bit out of guilt, because I don't do enough for my fellow veterans that are suffering from combat injury or PTSD. And I feel guilty about it. I just would struggle to fit that in my life in a meaningful way and serve everything else properly that I need to serve. So I would encourage you to find a leader in an organization that is serving this community and doing something towards combat injured and PTSD suffering veterans. And like or hate that we've been involved in conflicts in the last 20, 30 years. I'm not a fan. I think some of the wars were kind of dumb, but people have different opinions. We shouldn't take that out on the veterans. They deserve our love and kindness and attention. It's not something I feel I've been a good servant in. So in retirement, that's something I want to catch up on. But in the meantime, I would encourage you to find somebody who's living in that difficult world and finds inspiration and energy each and every day to continue on.
We've got the of the VA hospital in Omaha is right here, and there's all sorts of volunteering that happens there. There's a couple organizations that I worked with on the nonprofit side a couple of lifetimes ago at my first agency that work specifically with this audience. One incredible organization who, off the top of my head, I'm struggling to remember their name, but they did scuba diving for veterans who had PTSD, because it's a great way to be re-immersed and an experience for them. And it was this incredible program. And so I'm going to I'm going to take that call to action, Jon, and do a little bit of research and line up a couple of guests who are working in that. And, I think even that answer alone, and the previous one on the best leadership advice that you've ever received is just a testament to who you are as an individual and as a leader. And I couldn't be more thankful that you spent almost 50 minutes now. This episode has been almost 50 minutes talking through all of this. And I really appreciate your time and taking the, time out of your day. It's Monday here. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your expertise with us for the Activating Greatness podcast, Jon.
Awesome. Well, I'm a huge fan of Velocity. I love David. I love working with you. And I encourage anyone who's listening to this to engage with Velocity. You guys, they have my unqualified support.
I love it. Well, if you are listening to this and you thought this episode was the best, which I completely understand, make sure you leave it a 5-star review, leave some comments. Go connect with Jon on LinkedIn. Tell him that you're integrating Appropriately Annoyed into your team and into your leadership. Make sure you continue to download. I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but somehow, some way, because of great guests like Jon and an unbelievable audience like yourself, we're moving to 2 episodes a week. So as of March 9th, there's an episode every Monday and an episode every Thursday. And we couldn't do that without the individuals like yourselves listening and showing up and trying to strive for better. And certainly, Jon, couldn't do it without you. So thank you so much once again. And thank you for being a part of this community of leaders. And we will see you on the next episode of Activating Greatness.